Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar La Mesa Redonda, The Round Table, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio. Señores siguientes de USA la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda, desde el corazón del barrio hispano en la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez en compañía de Dylan Di Rosato al tablero y una invitada especial, Eleanor Ingersoll. Buenos días. Good morning, Eleanor.
Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. I'm going to comment on the first a couple of items, and then we'll find out why you're here and what you have to say to us. Democratic presidential campaign, the poll numbers. Bloomberg just jumped into the race with his $1 billion in the pocket, 6%, and he's in fifth place. Biden, 30%, Sanders, 22%, Warren, 16%, she's been going down. Mayor Pete, 9%. They lead the group. And then Warren has lost a lot of ground for her inability to provide numbers related to the cost of health care. And then the main event of the day, of the week, of the year, probably for the last 25 years, articles of impeachment against Donald Trump, obstruction of Congress, and abuse of power. Report debunking the deep state conspiracy, Inspector General Michael Horowitz, 500 pages, saying there is no evidence that anybody conspired against Trump during or after the election of 2016. FBI investigation was legitimate. No documentary or biased evidence of any attempted coup, as Trump has claimed for a long time. Trump misrepresented the report. I'm looking forward to the Durham report, he said. And Trump reacted to FBI Director Christopher Wray's comment regarding the Inspector General report, saying that the FBI into Trump's campaign 2016 was an authorized investigation and promising to work to improve the FBI response to some of the criticism that FISA applications apparently were faulty. So they were criticized for that, which, needless to say, Trump and his minions immediately jumped on that. FBI, they don't know how to do their job. No? So, and those are the highlights of today. So, today also, Trump is meeting at the White House with Russia's foreign minister. Good timing, Mr. Trump. It's either bad timing or it's sort of in your face to Congress. Is Mr. Lavrov, is he bringing words of comfort from Vladimir Putin? What secret message is he bringing, Mr. Trump? He's like, don't worry, Donald, we'll take care of you. You're still secure for the next election. We'll make sure we'll find something about Biden. The White House aides say the president is not upset, that he's working as usual. There are reasons to believe he's unhappy. He tweeted over 100 times on Sunday. Devin Nunes, an embarrassment to all Hispanics, still referring to a spy ring in spite of the IG report. And Barr is another embarrassment to the nation. William Barr, he was the first one to mention a spy ring, and now they continue with that. And the former hero of New York, Rudy Giuliani, just came back from Ukraine. He was over there trying to find more dirt on Biden. You sort of feel sorry for the guy because I think he lost his mind. Not possible that a human being would change in such a way from being an important figure in New York, especially after the 9/11 thing. And now he's Trump's lackey. So that's my comment for the day about what's going on. And now, on the banquillo, Eleanor Ingersoll. First of all, Eleanor, could you tell us some pertinent information? You're not from Philly originally, are you?
Yes, I am.
You are.
Yes,
Why was
many generations.
I'm mistaken then. I apologize for that. Okay. So, but you were not in Philly permanently. You have lived elsewhere.
I have lived elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So, what is this elsewhere?
After college at Temple,
Mm-hmm.
I went to Medford, Oregon, where I was a news producer, and then I helped to create a morning news program, which I anchored, and then I traveled then to Burlington, Vermont, where I was the morning news anchor and noon news anchor, and came back to Philly for some family issues and never expected to stay. And shortly thereafter, worked at Fox News and then went to WHYY shortly, or right in between there, happened to be introduced to the person that I would end up marrying and creating a family with, and end up staying in our neighborhood where I had only gotten a place with a roommate because we could walk to Fox together. So, fast forward, it ended up turning into home very rapidly.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. Um, yeah, you never know where fate is going to take you, right?
Never, never.
Um, I mean, one of the my longest period of employment was St. Joe's Prep. I don't know if you're familiar with St. Joe's Prep. It's a Jesuit Catholic school in Philly. I was in graduate school at Temple. The secretary said to me, "There's an opening at a school nearby. Are you interested? Here's your phone number." So, and my joke was always that I stopped by to find out who they were, and I stayed there for 3 decades. So
Exactly,
that's
exactly.
what happened. You never know.
You never know.
Um, yes, except some people have a life plan and they follow it. You know, in general terms, they follow. You know, what they want to study. I have a nephew who's been forever thinking that he was to be in somehow connected to sports, and he's following his heart. He's now in school, and he's at Temple following a course of studies to be a sports person. So it's interesting. Did you have a plan like that?
One of the
Because you
earliest
were involved
memories
in media, so.
One of the earliest memories I had was my mother was the development director at what was PCPA, Philadelphia College of the Performing Arts,
Mhm.
right on Broad Street above what was then the Schubert, is now the Miriam. And there was a sidewalk fair for the arts, and there were these little buttons at one of the booths. And I remember asking her, because it was, let's hear it for the dancers, let's hear it for the musicians, let's hear it for the conductors, and then one was let's hear it for the choreographers. And I remember asking her, what are choreographers?
What
And
do
she
they
said,
do?
those are the people that create the dances. And I said, they tell people what to do. And she said, yes. And I thought, that's exactly what I wanted to create. I wanted to spearhead. I knew that from very beginning. So I always thought of a producer as producing news,
Hmm.
producing consumable content in that manner. Well, fast forward, to 2017, and I end up taking the helm at Queen Village Neighbors Association, and realize it's a production just on a longer scale, longer deadlines, bigger scale, um, much more fickle audience because they can come up to you on the sidewalk and tell you exactly what they're
More
thinking.
difficult.
But
Yeah.
it's been interesting to see how even the Vegas, as your nephew's interest in sports, the Vegas thread can seem to weave through your life
Hmm.
throughout.
Yeah, well, I will ask you more about your civil engagement because I think it's very interesting. take on what you want to do. But I want to go back to your beginning in radio, television,
Actually
what you
began in
did.
print.
And print. Okay, newspaper
Yes.
here in
Yes.
Philly?
It was a summer paid internship at the Philadelphia Inquirer. I worked at the Adirondack Daily Enterprise. I worked at the Jackson Hole Guide out in Wyoming. And then I worked for the Nightly Business Report. This is before CNBC, out of the PBS station in Miami, Florida. And then moved on to Oregon.
Wow.
Oh, I think PHL 17 when it was Inquirer News Tonight.
PHL 17.
Yes, I
Right.
was there as well.
I saw you could have known my friend Margie Smith. She was also working at 17, I think. Was that Fox?
No, that
No,
was
what
gosh, what was that? That was PHL.
Yeah.
I don't think no.
No?
Fox was
'Cause
already.
Margie
it's
was in
over
the
in
news. On Market Street.
No. This back
Well,
then
now
it
it
was
is.
Winfield.
Okay. So that's what you were. Well, what I see, just listening to you, geographically, my head was just going crazy because you were in Miami, you were in Oregon, you were like all over the map. So a bit of a gypsy life, and you were all that time involved in newscast, radio, television, or print, as you say. I don't know. What type of television do you do? News also?
I did, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So were you a camera person or were you a writer?
Depending on where I was, I have been the producer,
Mm-hmm.
the anchor, a writer. Everything not technical.
Factotum. Yeah, that's the same here. I do everything except deal with
The booth.
crazy board or that.
All I did in the
don't
booth was I knew
understand.
where my mic was, so I could talk to the anchor when I was producing.
That's right. Yeah, I have the easiest part here, which is to talk. These guys have to worry about the sound and who's calling and how do you sound, how I sound. So anyway, we're going to take a brief pause here and usa la media, the round table, les habla Fernando Méndez, Dylan Di Rosato al tablero. Estamos en compañía de Eleanor Ingersoll. Regresamos en un momento.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. I have a mentor, and she convinced me to continue my education.
No one receives a diploma alone.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham, bam, minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high five.
Señoras oyentes de USA la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda. Les habla Fernando Méndez desde el corazón del barrio hispano en la ciudad del amor fraternal. Dylan de Rosato al tablero y estamos con una invitada especial, Eleanor Ingersoll, hablando sobre varios temas. So we were asking you about your travels. So I heard you mention Oregon, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Florida.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a gypsy travel. So, what else?
It was all a matter of getting as much experience, making as many connections, and building up a resume so I would be able to get a job as soon as I got out of school. And this is all pre-interwebs, so I became friends. Oh, I also where else did I intern? I interned at CBS in New York, and CBS in New York sent me, ironically, back to Philadelphia to cover the DuPont murder trial. And I met a reporter from the CBS station, and he was very nice to give me this fat directory of every news market in the country,
Wow.
gauged in their population stance. So from 1 to, like, I think there were 219 at that time. And so I just started calling places. I kind of gauged where I thought I would fit and where it was possible. And I just started calling places to see, did they have an opening? Could I come? You know, could I interview? Could I do this, that, or the other? And one of the only takers was, Idaho. I went to Idaho for an interview. I went to Oregon, and I'll never forget saying to my mom, if you let me use your points to fly to these places, I promise you I will come back with a job. And I will take that job, and I will be out of your hair. So, and I got both offers. So, but I ended up going with Oregon because I was an English-Spanish double major in college, and it was going to afford me the possibility of doing Hispanic coverage of migrant workers, because Medford, Oregon is the home of Harry and David, and they're an online ordering catalog, and their big commodity is pears.
Oh, wow. So, how's your Spanish, by the way?
Very bad. I haven't. I
So
don't
we
get
can-
that
I-
opportunity to
I thought we could
practice.
switch to Spanish.
I wish, but then
No.
you'd never have me back on the show ever. People would be
Oh, no,
mortified.
no. Listen, I did a radio show for about 5 years on All Soul Radio. One of my co-hosts was a guy who was born in Philadelphia, but he was Puerto Rican descent. His Spanish was horrible. And he knew it, and we knew it. So anytime he opened his mouth, I corrected him. So it's not la problema, it's el problema. And, so we went like that. But my friend, he's a good friend, Victor Negron. He's very well known in the community.
My Spanish would be worse.
But I don't think so. Victor was a record for the kind of Spanish he spoke. When I asked you what, I actually said to you I had an agenda because I like to address political issues, social issues, education, opioids, all the stuff that's going on right now with the drug crisis. And you quickly responded saying, forget it, this is what I'm interested in. So, I don't know, your main interest is neighborhood engagement, sort of commitment to the neighborhood. And it's a very interesting take with what you have. Sort of, if you make every effort to improve your own community, you'll be happier living in that place. That's how I understood what you said.
That's the foundation, that equation.
Hmm. And so after all the running around from network to network and radio to radio, television, newspaper, you end up running a neighborhood organization.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so that happened.
How did that happen? It was I went to one community meeting about a playground in my neighborhood that I felt was not living up to its potential, and that it wasn't comfortable for everybody in the neighborhood. It seemed to be owned at different times in the day by different factions. And so I went to this meeting, and my youngest son, is 11, and I'll never forget. I was pregnant with him, and I went, and we're sitting in a room in a circle, and it turned out that it wasn't so much about the playground, but the dogs that were kind of have like this ad hoc dog run in a tennis court, and there were people that hated the dogs, and there were the dog people that wanted their space. And I'll never forget saying, once you clear this up, I'm back in, but this needs to get, decided, because I don't throw my hat with either one. So, and then I slowly got back involved with the playground when there was a plan to redo it and build it up. And then I was approached by the president to help start a summer program with the housing development in the Queen Village neighborhood called Courtyard, Riverview at Courtyard. And so I started that, and then and that's just finished its 5th summer. And it's a collaboration between Courtyard, Queen Village Neighbors Association, volunteers. We're very proud of that work. And then in 2017, things shifted, and I was vice president and needed to assume the presidency, so I did. And as fate would have it, many, 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 many demanding projects seem to present themselves almost in rapid succession, akin to an avalanche. And you turn her, and then you just, you roll up your sleeves and you get involved. And then you start to realize that for it to truly work at its maximum potential, you need to be engaging your neighborhood and having them buy into what's happening. It's got to have synergy, or it's just a time suck.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is from Henry Kissinger, commenting on academics and saying, why the infights in academics are so nasty? And he said it's because the stakes are so small. And in the fights in your neighborhood association, you might have all these controversies. You say one about dogs and kids. Who's going to use the park more? Who's going to have the upper hand, or can you share it? So, I suppose, ultimately, shared use is probably the ideal solution, that you have space for both children and dogs somehow.
Oh, the dogs got kicked out. But they're getting a new dog park, when some other development program comes through.
There's a great dog park at the edge of the Schuylkill on
Yes.
Spruce Street. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But you bring up an excellent point, because I will have to, I will say, in my 11 years, there's always going to be spats, and, a neighborhood is very small, but within neighborhoods, there are micro neighborhoods, and they're a block. Your micro neighborhood is your immediate neighbors, because whatever's affecting that block is affecting all of you. So that becomes your priority. That's never going to stop. And I understand that. And that kind of investment in that very hyper localness is also of value. But I am impressed that we're all starting to look at bigger issues that affect us, and not just the trash on my street and my neighbor that won't do A, B, or C. It is, how healthy are our schools? How good is our immediate infrastructure? Are we being good stewards? Because we're a river ward in Queen Village, so are we being good stewards of the riverfront and participating where we can in how it's developed and how it's going to affect us? Because 95 essentially cut off all the river wards from the river, and so there's this push and this development happening to tie them back together. So these are larger issues making themselves available for very hyper local participation. So that's exciting to see that transformation blossoming.
That reminds me of a very nice area in your neighborhood where I went with Mike McPhilmy and other people when there was the solar eclipse, and that seemed like the best area to go watch it. And somehow we ended up on this small pier with a group of your neighbors, probably. And I was surprised how nice that area is. It has been well developed, well kept. So that's probably part of what you have done, or your group have done, your association, to maintain that area. All these things don't happen by themselves. I mean, that's when
Correct.
we start looking at improvements.
When things happen by themselves, they usually need to be undone down the road. Like
right.
it's better when it's a group.
Or if it was just one person deciding to do it, and then someone said, like, wait a minute, it's for everybody. Which brings me to other topics related to dealing with associations and all that. And we'll address that after a brief pause that we're going to have in a minute. But I'm always thinking about the political divisions, especially now, when there are so many people determined to do it, believe this is right or this is wrong, the political parties and whatnot. Even if there's no direct political involvement, somehow it comes into the equation at some point. Let's say conservative versus liberal, that would happen in any association. But the main impact that I can see in your, especially in your part of the city, is important for everybody, but education is very important. And I know you have one of the best schools in your part of the city, so I'm sure many parents are envious of that situation there. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the schools and how you see they have improved or they haven't, or what needs to be done. So we're in a conversation here with Eleanor Ingersoll, hablando sobre la comunidad en Queen Village. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Estamos en Usa la Media, la Mesa Redonda. Dylan de Rosato al tablero. Regresamos en un momento. Señores oyentes de USA la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda, desde el corazón del barrio hispano en la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dylan de Rosato al tablero. Estamos en compañía de Eleanor Ingersoll hablando sobre varios temas Y el más reciente, the last one I wanted to talk to you about was education, because you have good schools in your neighborhood, especially Meredith is
Mm-hmm.
in your area is
Mm-hmm.
one of the it's sort of everybody wants to go there. So does that create tension in the community that everybody wants to go and then not enough spaces? I don't know.
Yeah, on many levels, just that.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The as I said, it was very interesting because I um, didn't know of Queen Village. I'd always
Mm-hmm.
been above Broad. Even when I went to school, I lived around Rittenhouse Square before it was Rittenhouse Square, and took the subway to school and worked in restaurants. So when it came to trying to find a place, and I'd just gotten back from Vermont, and I was working at Fox, my roommate said, "I see this." That there's a Trinity in Queen Village. Where is that? And I said, well, I don't know, but let's go find it. We ended up renting a place for a year that I ultimately bought for my landlord, and then met my husband to be, who also lived there. And so we stayed very organically in Queen Village, not really thinking about anything other than the fact that we were, it was very comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And comfortable in that we like the people, we like the amenities, etc. So I didn't know anything about the school until I started talking to people at the playground who had older kids there, and then there was just happened to be a big influx of my kids, my older ones, which are now 15 and 13. The neighborhood was crazy with this age group. So we were all entering school at the same time, and it was right at that for my second daughter that Arlene Ackerman was threatening half day kindergarten. And that was something that really bonded everybody together
Mm-hmm.
and really got us invested in our schools, because not only was it half day kindergarten, but it was cutting the nurse, cutting counselors, all of those. So in the face of all that, we bonded very closely, and there were some really ambitious, forward-thinking members in the community. One being Christina Pascucci, or Christina Luciano, who was very masterful with fundraising and doing events. So I say all this because out of that fear factor, there was a very tight bonding of that neighborhood to really get behind that school, and essentially raise funds to really inject a monetary advantage for that. And one of the reasons I believe I was asked to join the Queen Village Neighbors Association Board of Directors is that I had gone to Nebinger, which is a couple of blocks south of Meredith, and part of the catchment from Queen Village is the Nebinger catchment, and started volunteering there and helping out there as well with other parents from Meredith to try to balance the scales and the playing field. And then there is still a group called Friends of Neighborhood Education,
Mm-hmm.
where all over the city, especially in light after 2008 and the bottom dropping out and people needing, access to public and free education, friends groups started in a lot of schools
Mm-hmm.
to raise funds, to help out the principal, to organize volunteers to go into classrooms. So it was, while yes, we've got a great model in Queen Village with Meredith,
Mm-hmm.
it can be replicated in parts all around the city, and that's what you're seeing everywhere, because then it spread to Nebinger, and it will spread further south to Vera Washington. Jackson Elementary, further west of us, also at maximum capacity with
Mm-hmm.
students, and the list goes on. There is a. It's heartening to see a general reinvestment in neighborhood schools.
What is your opinion of charter schools?
I probably don't know enough
Mm.
to and might be speaking out of turn. but I can say that the basic equation of shifting of funds is completely inadequate and unequitable.
Okay. Yeah, because oddly enough, they have been successful in the Hispanic community uh, up around this area. We're not too far from the Pan American Charter School, which was founded by Congreso. And I was part of the board of Congreso when we began it. And initially, when we started it, one of our board members, Pedro Rodriguez, who eventually became the head of the School Reform Commission, he was running uh, the schools of Philly. Initially, he opposed it, and then later on, he realized that we actually did a decent job with Pan American Charter. And for the most part, they have been successful in the Hispanic community. So I don't know enough about all of them or how they operate, but it's one of those things that at least I can attest to the success of a few of them. Aspira had a few, and I think they've been losing ground on that. They lost a couple of schools, but for different reasons, not because they don't work. I think they have done a good job with them. More or less because they also get parents involved, and that is key to success for many of them, to get the parents working with the teachers, with the administration.
It's macro and it's micro. And as I said, while I don't know that much, the macro with charter schools is the inequitable funding and the siphoning of money from the budget for the school district of Philadelphia. But it's also that in any school district of Philadelphia public neighborhood school, there are the same rules throughout, correct?
Right.
But each charter school gets to write its own charter, correct?
Yes.
And I think that's what can lapse into confusion and other various inequities, because that charter is only for like that small island and not connecting.
But they still had to respond. I'm not totally connected to this. My connection to the charter school dates back to like almost 10 years, maybe less. But so I don't know any recent information. But they have to respond to supervision by the school board here in Philly. So they're not totally isolated and operating independently. So, but I want to go to the basic concept of education being so important for society. Cuba, that was a communist failure, succeeded in having a 97% literacy rate, which is like such a contradiction, because you think an educated people would want to be free, and yet here they are in a very despotic state, having the best education, or having a great education, or at least an education that reaches most of the people, which is because, I mean, they produce doctors like, hundreds of them, and they are not the best qualified doctors, but they were people who the Cubans send them to Africa to do, to help the healthcare in Africa. So it's one of those things that Cuba is a controversial place in that sense alone. But I believe that education, now I'll stop and I'll let you say something here. I always give Japan and Germany as the best examples of where education was important, and they rose up from the ruins of the Second World War to become really successful countries, based mostly on the fact that they have great educational systems. And that's what we need here. I don't know why, with all the money we have in this country, we don't have a better educational system.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more.
It's a puzzle. what instead of buying more weapons, more tanks, more aircraft carriers, why don't we invest in school?
And it's a shame because there does seem to be more sweat equity investment ready to be made that smart politicians, smart government can really work with and really help to blossom. And sometimes it just doesn't seem to be making the connection. You've got all these parents that want to go in and put money into schools and put money into fixing schools and helping teachers and assisting the principals. And it's still the schools and the parents trying to figure out the best way to make it work. It seems like it could use a producer, someone to oversee like a strategic plan for how to keep these tools together and building more.
Right. Seems like a job for you.
Don't tell my family.
We're going to start a campaign now. We have your name. We have to start a platform
Yes, yes.
and vote you into this newly created position,
Yes.
czar of all schools.
I like that. I like that.
Czarina in this case.
Zarina.
One of the problems in this city, in terms of governance, and I know you don't want to get into politics, but one of the problems in this city is the one party that has been in charge of the city for more than 6 decades, the Democratic Party, and because it breeds corruption. I was just reading the list of public servants that are in jail, that have been accused, maybe not going to jail, but at least they have been thrown out of office for embezzlement, for corruption, for all kinds of shenanigans. That's an incredible number.
Agreed.
So,
It goes back to what you said, where we were talking, and if one person takes charge of something really big and responsible, really big and important, the likelihood that you're going to have to go back and correct it is
Right.
greater. But if it's a coalition, a balanced coalition building something, it's going to be more sturdy and last longer. That's my impression.
well, on the other side of this brief pause, we're going to talk more about this, sort of the philosophy of education. I'm interested in your take on some of the things that I have experienced in Philly with education. Estamos en la mesa redonda, les habla Fernando Méndez, Dylan de Rosato al tablero. Estamos hablando con Eleanor Ingersoll sobre la educación y otros temas. Regresamos en un momento.
Our hearts are made stronger by how we treat others.
Put her there.
The light you share can impact those around you, but so can the darkness.
Later, twerps!
Did Pete saying mean things bother ya?
So when you reach out to another person, take a moment to consider how they will feel and let your heart be the key to making a difference. Because of you, someone's entire day, year, or even life can change.
In every heart, there's hope.
What do you think you're doing, Kevin?
Was just gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
Like hearing voices.
Like your text to emoji ratio.
Oh man, the selfies.
Selfie nailed it.
We all have warning signs that let us know that we're probably not okay to drive. Mine is pretending to be your subconscious.
Craig, come on man, let's split a ride home.
Señores oyentes de USA la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda, The Round Table, desde el corazón del barrio hispano en la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dylan de Rosato al tablero, en compañía de Eleanor Ingersoll hablando sobre la educación y otros temas. Eleanor, we're going to have about 5 minutes for this. It's not enough. It will take a lifetime to talk about this. Suppose you had a magic wand right now. What would you do about education in this city?
That is a tough one, because everything is so interconnected that one wave of a wand could fix one thing, but it's part of the huge web. But I would have to, if it were magical with a wand, I would say an endowment for the school district of Philadelphia.
Well, usually, yes, that's where we usually go, right? To money as the solution. And yet, and I know money is essential, but you have to have great teachers, and they are the essence of education.
Agreed.
And I say that as a former teacher, because everything else around it is just administration. It's just moving paperwork. It's trying to find funds and doing this. But if you have at the heart of it, you have a good, well-trained body of teachers, you're going to do well.
And with an endowment, you would be able to send teachers back for continuing education.
Right.
You'd be able to pay teachers more. I'm sure there are thousands of fantastic teachers that don't teach it all anymore because they couldn't afford it.
Right.
So, yes, I completely agree. Money isn't the answer, but properly managed, it could be a wonderful pathway to better solutions.
Yes,
better
I was not diminishing the role. Money is going to be at the heart of any solution here. If there's no money, there's nothing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot pay people. You cannot, keep a building functioning. You can have
Correct.
good desks and books and computers. But there are all these elements. People coming in to contribute to it in some way. I was at a meeting with Comcast a while ago when Comcast was giving computers to poor kids, just a basic computer, so they could communicate. They could use Wi-Fi, and they could use that to further their education. That's one of the things that's happening. I think the technology is helping us to solve many of these problems. There's a lot of stuff that can be done now that we were not able to do.
If you have access to the materials and the training.
And you need money.
That digital divide can be frightening because if you miss the window, then it becomes the fear factor that holds too many back from pursuing jobs, education, higher education, anything.
Yes. Yes, that I see that as essential right now. I also see it as an immigrant. I see the need for immigrants to learn English as the working language of this country. I don't care how much you need to have information in your own language. In order to function, you need to learn English properly. And that's one way to counteract the effects of discrimination and all that.
True.
Just defend yourself that way, and it will enable you to have a career to function in society. I don't know. But all this is part of education. Anyway, this has been a very enlightening conversation. So you have to come back.
I hope you'll have me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a lot to explore with this because we can address all other topics related to this in terms of our growing population. And I don't know if you're adverse to talking about other issues, but drugs, immigration, all this is part of the body of this society that's making us either better or worse each day.
Mm-hmm.
and we're all working to make it better. And I admire what you do because you, in your area where you're having a great impact.
Thank you.
Yeah, from I got it from your notes where you send me that at the core what you believe is that you get involved to improve your society, then you'll be happier there.
Engagement is just another form of education.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always have to be in a classroom with books or, processing information that's completely alien to you. It can be, how do I meet my neighbors? How do I get involved in cleaning up my neighborhood? How do I get involved in supporting the schools that the kids in this neighborhood go to? So that's at its core too. It's the production of more educational opportunities. And usually for adults.
Eleanor, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
And thank you. Gracias por su sintonía en el día de hoy. Les agradecemos mucho. Estamos aquí en la mesa redonda. Dylan de Rosato Altabrero, les habla Fernando Méndez. Estamos en compañía de Eleanor Ingersoll. Los esperamos hasta la próxima.